They heard that I'm a rod. They asked me to give a shear. I gave a pilpul shear. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. Okay. Later that night, there's a disco at the hotel, and I meet this kid, Ehud, must be 13 and a half, 14, spiked hair, gelled, and all the rest, and asked me how come I don't go to the disco. I said, well, I'm Ashkenazi. We don't do that disco. Anyway, the next part of the story is Shabbos morning. They have davening early Shabbos morning. So early Shabbos morning, and they asked me to be the Baal Koreh, because after all, I'm a Rav. I forgot, it was a difficult parsha. The rest of them didn't feel, I said no. The rest of them didn't feel like being Balei Kriya either. In the meantime, a kid, I don't know, a strange name like Benito or something, his father says, go get Ehud, same kid with the joke. Ehud, we were davening downstairs, the glass partition, and the other side is the pool. He goes to get his brother, who is Ehud. Ehud's in the pool. Ehud comes out of the pool, and he changes from his bathing suit with his brother. They change clothes, and dripping wet. And meanwhile, Benito now is wearing the swimsuit of his brother. Ehud gets up and reads flawlessly. And then when he finishes, he passes by and gives me a wink. That was it. I had to like crawl out of that situation. Okay, that's my, now I turn this to Rabbi Danzig. Would you please give us a shear in bathing suit, without the bathing suit, with the tummy?
You can't see what I'm. You don't know what I'm wearing beneath the. Beneath the shirt.
I don't want to
know. Okay, so today we're continuing in Siman Kuf Chet, and about Reach, and actually we were in the middle of Sif Aleph, so Joel is going to continue in this very long Ramah in Sif Aleph. So I'm going to actually start off with Joel teaching, and then I'll take up after that.
Yeah, I want to back up a little bit just to make sure, because we kind of rushed at the end there. And so I want to start maybe with Ve'ima Isur Davar Harif. This is it's in the Ramah in Sif Aleph, and it's right after the tet in the shach, right, where there's a tet for the shach right there. We're not going to do that shach necessarily inside, but I want to start reading there. So maybe let's see, who's my Yavni? You're first on my screen, so you have the bad luck or the good luck today of getting to read first. So,
and you want me to read in the Ramah? You're saying,
in the Ramah, yeah.
ואם האיסור דבר חריף, וכל שכן אם ההיתר דבר חריף, ריחא מילתאי. So if the Isur, should I translate?
I don't think you have to.
Okay, fine, great. Yeah, that was fair enough. ואפילו בדיעבד, ריחא מילתאי, ואפילו בדיעבד אסור, אם שניהם מגולים. אבל אם אחד מהם מכוסה, אפילו בבצק, בעלמא מותר. Yeah, should I keep going?
Give us what that means. What were we talking about here?
Oh, sure. So if the things are in the oven and they are uncovered and either one of them is spicy, especially if the davar heter is spicy, then reicha is a concern, and the once heter thing is now asur. But if they're covered with
even if one of them is covered, right?
Even if one of them is covered with batzek, which with like dough, then you're fine.
Yeah, which is we talked about is the ancient way of instead of tinfoil, they didn't have tinfoil, they had dough that you put over something.
Right. So the difference being the dough you're presumably going to eat.
You are, but remember also that in general, although we did have a whole thing with a barrel of wine and dough on top of it, but right, dough is not a fatty substance in itself, right, and is less likely less absorbent. But yeah, it sounds like
Right, so the dough,
I would
the
have thought
dough-
the dough is very, very porous. I would think that the thing
But it's
could
not
seep
fatty.
through the dough very
it's
easily.
not fatty. No, not fatty.
Right, not fatty, but it's porous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
like
yeah, but the
I make
idea
my
is-
doughs with butter,
could-
but
Joel, you gave me a little inspiration that what you're saying. Let me just rephrase what you're saying. What you're saying
Yeah.
is that by putting because we were bothered, and Yavli especially last week was bothered by how come the dough isn't usser. So we have this halacha that two dry things that are baking in the oven are fine. There's no reach in two non-fatty things that are cooking at the same time. So essentially, by putting the dough over the thing, you turn it into a dry thing, and now it becomes the din of a dry thing. So then the
Yeah.
does that mean
dough
we need both fat and spicy, or is spicy alone without fatty?
spicy is equivalent to fat. No, I think spicy is
Yeah.
equivalent to fat. So by putting the cover over, are you saying so now you can have one?
Yeah, that's the
spicy.
question. Yeah.
You have one spicy. How come it doesn't
Right, it
mifatem?
definitely seems like one spicy thing is enough. So presumably it's the dough needs to be on the spicy one or on, yeah,
Well, we talked about this right last time. We said that it,
or on the issol. If it's on the issol, if the heter is the spicy one and the dough is on the issol, you should be fine. The problem
if the
that I would
heter-
have is if the dough is on the heter and the spice
again, if the
is,
spicy one is the
if the spice
heter,
is the issol, if the
the
spice is the
spice has to
heter,
be the isser, right?
Yeah.
Because if the
Mm.
spicy one is the heter, then there's no problem. Because then
no, there's
No,
definitely a
no,
problem.
no, because it
Kosher
draws the
can.
flavor. It draws the
oh,
flavor.
it draws the flavor back into it. Right.
Yeah. So
It's backwards. Right. I remember that. It's backwards.
that was the kolshiken that we had there, which is like really interesting, right? That it actually is the opposite. Although I can't remember where I saw it now, but I saw someone who argued with that kolshiken and said that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, no, I've been thinking about it. I haven't found a good answer yet. Although if you look in the Shach, right, in Yud, he says, "Afilu b'vasek b'alma." I'll just read it. It's very quick, right? V'chatuv be'isur v'heter mihu lechachila tov leachmir ad kan lashono. So he doesn't even seem to like that answer, as far as I'm reading the Shach, at least.
Wait, let's state out the problem again.
Yeah, is that so? If you have, let's pretend the following is that you have. Well, yeah, actually, it might actually solve it, right? The whole question that Yafi's asking is: you put dough on top of, you have something that is harif and something that's not harif, and let's play both cases. All right, you put the dough on top of the harif thing. Let's say, and remember the harif
Is
thing.
the harif thing asur?
The harif thing is mutar in this case, right? Because that's our major concern.
Then you're fine,
So
I think.
So the harif thing is mutar. You put dough on top of the harif thing, it can no longer, the harifut of it can no longer go up and draw out the flavor of the isser thing, right? So that part's
Right.
fine.
And the dough is also fine because the isser thing is not
Right.
fatty.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and then if you flip it and the isser is covered, then the reach of the isser never escapes, and the reach of the dough never, who cares, right? Because the dough
The
doesn't
dough is
have
usser anyway.
Yeah.
The only case where it's an issue, yeah. But I don't think it's a big deal. The only case there's an issue is if it's the isul that is charif, which we said is still an issue, even though it's not the kol shekan. If the isul is charif and the heter is covered with the dough, then
Yeah, but then the
That's
harifut
when-
potentially it would just mix with the dough and wouldn't really get, and
fine.
again,
But so what? You're supposed to take off the dough then and eat the pie underneath.
but even then, I think that's the lesser case anyway, right? And dough.
We weren't worried. We
dough-
weren't worried that the harif, right?
Yeah,
We aren't worried about that. Remember, we said we're only worried that the harifut draws to it, not
no,
that it
we're
pushes into
especially
it.
worried. But
Oh, you
it
think
does say
there's-
right. It says right. It says v'im ha'isur davar harif v'kol shekeni ma'heter davar harif. So it does sound like if the isur is davar harif, that's also problematic. Yeah.
anyway,
Okay.
But
think
I think it's
a
that'd be
minor.
the one case where maybe, but I have to imagine that even in that case, right, because this is the lesser case, and we already know that the dough doesn't really tend to draw flavor. It may not be such a problem. On the other hand, you have a shach there that says you should be lechatchila, you should be machmir about that case. So that's my guess. Obviously with it's a
we
much
should be
easier
machmir about it in
Yeah.
general. Yeah.
in general, but well, with only covering one, at least.
Right.
So if you have isser and heter in the same oven, and which one should you put aluminum foil on? The one is
Yeah, normally I would put it on the isser, right? You just this way it doesn't spread any reach.
Mhm.
Because even if the isser is fatty, then it's not a problem.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but and again, right, aluminum foil is a whole different story because there you're not going to eat the aluminum. At least I don't think you eat the aluminum foil. So in the modern world, so,
Some bits of it might get into your food.
it's true. So, but that has to be a pagum or pogem rather, I imagine, right? So, but okay, so this is a really good point, and I think the harifut point is interesting. I didn't see it here, but in other places, the Ramah will talk when we talk about harifut, especially when we talk about like that where it sweetens flavor that became pagum in a vessel and so forth. The Ramah makes a claim there that it only counts as harif if it's rov harif, right? So we're not talking about like something that you put some pepper on, like we're talking about something that is like you're actually cooking something harif, like not something that you spiced. So spice cooking is a problem, not spice cooking, but not spiced cooking, if that makes makes sense. So, okay. Anyway, keep going, Yavni.
אם אפו או צלו איסור והיתר תחת מחבת אחת מגולין אסור, אפילו בדיעבד, שם ברוך, והוא הדין אם אפו בכהי גבנה, פת עם בשר, אסור לאכלו בחלב.
Okay, great.
So that's if you're baking things under like that are sort of like covered together and exposed with underneath that cover, they're exposed in there. And so right, so that's if it's isur v'heter, or if it's bread which is supposed to be parve with meat, then you can't eat that bread with chalav.
Yeah, great. Right. And this is, I mean, you can imagine, right? This is a case where the two, you have something that's very low hanging over the two of them. It becomes one kisui over two things.
Right.
So, but
it's almost like it's shrinking the oven.
Exactly. So, okay. Keep going.
אבל בזה אחר זה.
Yeah, I was going to do the shach, but I want to skip it for the moment. So go for it.
אבל בזה אחר זה אין לחוש, אלא אם כן הזיע המחבת משניהם דאז אסור אפילו בזה אחר זה, אם היו שניהם מגולין דהווה ככיסוי של קדרה. כדלאל סימן צדיק ג'. But doing one after the, in this situation of like being under an overhanging thing, then if it's one after the other, then there's no problem, unless there's some condensation or dripping. Condensation, yeah.
That was the word I was thinking, was condensation is probably the best word there. So.
In which case, it's like the case of a pot lid, which I assume means like you're using this lid and as it becomes part of the kli. It's like anyway.
Which you have to imagine, right? If you're cooking two things right next to each other and you put something over both of them, even if it's not like, even if they're in separate pots, but it's like right on, either covering both of them or even a little bit above, and you watching the stuff drip from, evaporate, drip. That's a problematic thing, even one right after the other potentially.
Right.
So, but okay, good. I don't have too much more to say about that unless somebody else does. But
well, it's important to just recognize that zaya is you have to actually see it. And
yes.
Here we're talking about this concept of zaya, which is going to be the real problem with ovens as opposed to reach, which we're going to learn later. But this is there are two issues with ovens. One is reach, and reach is lav milta really, so that's not a problem. But zaya is a thing, and that can make an oven, according to some opinions, fleshig or milchig.
Yeah, but we see here as well, though, that covering can solve that problem, right? If you cover the thing individually,
right? Well, for
that
sure,
is a solution. Yeah. But no, I think that's important. And I have seen that, I think we've all seen cases, you can imagine like a very small, cooking situation where there's or a very tiny oven, again, where the top isn't too far above, and it's like literally right above.
Rav Moshe says that Zayah is only a problem if you actually see the Zayah. You can't, we don't
Yeah.
forbid based on imaginary Zayah.
So,
Right, that's what seems to be what it's suggesting here. Right.
but I'd almost claim imaginary Zayah is
Many
go.
post-human Eretz Yisrael say feeling is the same thing as seeing.
Mm,
In other words, that rush, you put your hand somewhere and then your hand is almost like burnt or whatever. Okay.
mhm. From the steam and not from the heat of just the oven we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could
Okay.
this also be a distinction between you were talking last week also about the size of the oven, between say an oven and a toaster oven? Why a toaster oven is more likely to be considered basari halavi as opposed to my bigger oven.
I mean, we saw small ovens can be a problem in general, especially on, and even for Zayah might be a problem according to some sources, right? That was the, Tosfot says that the whole debate in the Gemara between Rav and Levi is really about small ovens, and those are a problem even for Zayah. Although whether or not we
Did you mean even for Recha?
What was that?
Did you mean even for Recha? For both, anyway, yeah.
No, I meant Recha. No, I said even for Rav, as opposed to, as you mean, not only for Rav, not for Levi, right? Levi, even in a small oven is okay, but diavad at least. So, and just maybe that's important to remind people, right? That the whole debate we're having here is for small ovens, there's a debate about whether or not b'diavad you're okay, and there's that seems to be the way that most people understand it. Rav says b'diavad recha is a milta, and Levi says it's not a milta, which means it really isn't a thing, but we shouldn't do it lechatchila. And then the Tosfot come and they make this, I would call it amendment, adaptation, reapplication, whatever we want to call it, but we're talking about small ovens in the Gemara, and we have big ovens and maybe vented ovens as well, which is another thing we've seen, it haven't played out too strongly. And that may make a huge amount of difference where even though Recha is milta, it's not enough of a milta to affect things in a big oven, right? Where everything kind of spreads out and it's maybe so little recha or something like that.
Of course, our ovens today are perhaps not like Tosfos' ovens. I mean, if you see an old oven, I mean, if I like children's book called "The Blueberries for Sal," and
great book. Yeah,
and if you look at the oven there, she's got a big 1940s oven, like cast iron oven. It's a very different thing.
I did for the halacha review last week, though. I looked at 12 esronim in terms of a volume is about, I think, 1.5 cubic feet, which is not very big. If I remember correctly, the Chazon Ish, though, I think, is the one who says that 12 esronim is like what the bottom holds, not the entire oven, right? And he's looking for something much bigger. So there could be debates about what 12 esronim actually means.
Right.
So. I don't know if we covered that last week either. 12 esronim is usually given as the difference between a small versus big oven. So, okay. By the way, my oven just at home, which is I think a fairly standard oven, is I measured it was 4.5 cubic feet, just to give people a sense. So.
And how is that an esronim?
It was a lot. It was it was about 2 or 3 times 12. So yeah.
You're saying you have a very big oven?
No, I think it's pretty standard size.
I'm saying your oven by that standard would be big, you're saying?
Maybe big, yeah. So by that standard, I mean, we can make an argument that maybe to some poskim it's not. So, right. Okay. So we're at Yesh Omrim now. You have to keep going for the Yesh Omrim.
יש אומרים בכל מקום שדאמרינן ריחא מילתא ואוסר בדיעבד, היינו דווקא דלקה 60 מן ההיתר נגד האיסור, אבל בדאיקה 60 מן ההיתר, אפילו בכל מה שבתנור מבטל האיסור. ולצורך הפסד יש לנהוג כן. So in any case, in any of the cases where we're going to oser b'diavad based on recha, there's an opinion that you can still be batal and shishim, and that's for everything that's in the oven, not each dish separately. Unlike if you were to dip something in successively, and the Rama is only willing to say that we should hold by this in the case of Hefsed.
Yeah, that's a really great point, right? This thing is, even if it's 60-1, you might say it was continuously supplying, right? He says, no, we don't. There's an opinion, Yesh Omrim, right, that says no, right? It's from the Aruch, and he says you can behave that way if there's need. So if you have, I don't know, a very big, kosher meat pot, and not pot, a big piece of kosher meat cooking in an oven right next to a very small piece of non-kosher meat at a 60-1 ratio, then maybe that's okay. But if it's especially if you've you didn't realize it and you're like, that meat was very expensive. So,
and it's 60 against the thing that gives off the rate. There's no way to actually evaluate the size of the Reicha.
I didn't see anything like that. I could look again, but yeah, I also have to imagine, just based on what we've seen up until now, right? We don't usually talk about. There's sometimes we say, well, how much did this kli swallow? But usually we assume the whole thing gave off all of its flavor, and sometimes multiple times, right? Even for certain cases. So,
even though it could be cinnamon, it could be a small piece of cinnamon. You have 60 against it, and it gives its flavor.
Good, yeah.
It doesn't give its flavor. It gives it smell. But if there's 60 against it, we're going to say it's mutter. Even though the food clearly smells like cinnamon.
Which we wouldn't if it were doing taste.
We wouldn't do if it were giving taste, right?
Yeah. But then it would be much greater ratio that's a
whatever ratio would be rid of the taste.
Yeah, that 60-1 is a stand-in for flavor in general, and we did see a Gemara. I don't know if it was over the summer or this year, like that for spices it could be a much higher ratio than 60.
Right. So this, in a sense, this makes no sense because we're comparing apples to oranges. What does 60 have to do with anything? 60 is talking about tam. And it's talking about getting rid of flavor. And here we're getting about reach. What are we bringing in an irrelevant measurement here? So that's the argument against.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. But he's saying, listen, this is only a chumrah because really reich ala milta maybe. And so we're being a chumrah. So don't be more machmir than you would be for the average case of tam.
I mean, you could make the argument that if anything is giving tam, then it would, why wouldn't it also be giving reach? In which case, right, if you had that piece of cinnamon actually in the dish, shouldn't you, or not cinnamon, because cinnamon is a bad example, but if you had that piece of iso actually in the dish, then we can't be more machmir about the reach because we've already said that it's mutar if it's less than 1 in 60.
You're right. I'm talking about as a weird case of cinnamon where 60 is not the criteria anymore. Question is, even there, do we take 60 as a heter?
Right.
You're right. If it's just pork and there's 60 against the pork, then it does make sense that we wouldn't be more machmir on the smell.
This also though plays into the whole question of when we talk about reicha, are we talking about is it because reich at the end of the day gives ta'am, and ta'am is what we're concerned with, or is reich itself its own concern, which seems to be the second, seems to be really the case, right?
Yeah.
But here we've fallen back on ta'am as the concern as opposed to reich in some ways. But we're 60-1. Well, that must, if it cancels tam in general, it must even cancel reach for things that are very, spicy. Is I think the claim there. So,
right. Okay.
Yeah, that's my guess. Again, this is, and one of the things that we were also seeing the Ramah build up here is a system of, on one hand, being choshesh to the opinions that recha is a milta, and at the other hand, he's got all these opinions to rely on that recha is not love miltahi, and so for cases when it's necessary, we can rely on that opinion. It's not, there's some pretty huge poskim who think that halacha kelevi. So
this is a very important point, and we talked about last week. But yeah, that really he's paskening reach is lav milta, and he's just putting a chumrah of reach is milta as a chashash, just like we said. I could bring in again for the 50th time, like we said about Chanan B'Shar Suri. Really, he's basketing that there is no Chanan B'Shar Suri. It's just a chumrah in certain cases. So too here, you see that he has this kind of a non-binary world. There's a non-binary world.
He's talking about people's experience. Reach is a very strong experience. In fact, it's the first experience. Boy, this kitchen really smells treif. Smells good. Oh, that's treif. No, it's a nothing. But you have to validate at least the hava mina, not just in being from or makpid or muhudar, but I'm just repeating myself, but just on the basis of that's that first experience. And then you go, it smells good. No, can't smell that good. What's happening? Oh no. And then some swear words, and then you say, oh, well, most poskim doesn't.
That also, I mean,
Try explaining that to your kids when they're at a certain age.
Well, I mean,
it's really kosher.
That's how we opened last week, right? When I asked people, like, how do you feel? Like, imagine you didn't
And
have.
by the way, last week when you said, how do you feel? I said it now this week based on you. I said to myself, this is the first time I ever heard this in a shir. How do you feel? I don't feel anything. I grew up in a Litvisha family in which, as my wife says, a feeling, if you stub your toe on walking, that's a feeling. Anything else is not a feeling. So anyway, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fair.
No, I think I got contaminated by you. That this is the first experience. Therefore, you have to kind of like, I'm sorry for talking to it. You have to propel it forward. Why would it be a problem before you?
Mm-hmm.
You have to inhabit the Isur before you say it's nothing.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm done.
I'm betraying my own Litvisha roots on that. Okay, good. So with that though, and since we should, the next piece here is going to be about, which we saw in the Tosfot, the question about things that are not batel b'mashu, like chametz b'fesach, which is going to be, something that's probably going to be on all of our minds coming up soon, although maybe not in this way. So maybe we'll go to the next. Isaac, I think you're next on my screen to read. So do you want to pick up at the Yeshomrin, the Isur Hoser b'mashu in the Ramah?
Sorry, I cut out there for a moment. Were you asking me to go on? Or?
I was asking Isaac to take over for you.
I would not like to. Thank you.
You would not like to. All right, Noam, you're next. So I'm going to.
Sounds great. All right. Yesh omrim di sur ha'oser b'mashahu kagon chametz b'pesach reicha milta v'oser afilu b'diavad im hatanor katan v'hu satum v'isor v'eter megulin toch ha'tanor. So there are those who say that prohibited substance that forbids in any minute amount, like chametz on Pesach, reicha is a thing, and it forbids even after the fact if the tanor is small and closed up, and if the prohibited and permitted substances are uncovered in the oven. Which I think this phrasing is awesome, because even when they're trying to machmir, they have to create like all the conditions have to be like imperfect for even us to get there. The Yeshomrim she'en lechalek, and there are those who say that we shouldn't differentiate between mashahu and all other cases. V'mkom hefsed yesh lismoch avrei mekilin, and in a case of loss, we can rely on the mekil people. Vayen lekaman sof siman kuv yurchet im yesh lachmir lachachila lishpot shtei kederot ve'achad mehen shel isor al kira. And see above and see below in Kuf Yurchet whether we're supposed to be machmir lechachila in the case of two pots, and one of them is isor on the kira, or to roast the forbidden next to the permitted. So not in an oven, but side by side.
Great. So I'm going to back up. We'll get to that case in 1 second. But I don't know if you remember the Tosfot there, right? Talked about if you're making matzah on Pesach during the 7 days of Pesach, and one of them becomes chametz, right? You didn't poke holes in it. It bubbled up too much, right? And it became chametz. Does the reach of that make everything else in that oven asur? And the interesting thing is that actually seemed, and the Shach, we don't have to necessarily, I don't think it's worth diving into, but he brings up the whole question of that Tosfos seemed to actually be talking about big ovens. It didn't seem to be talking about small ovens in that case. And nonetheless, the Ramah here seems to rule that that is only the case for small ovens. And chametz for Pesach is one of the major cases we have, of course, right? Is not batel b'mashahu. But anybody look in Siman Kuf Yud Chet to see what this case is with when you put two things in a kira next to each other? Oh, but all right, I will. I didn't bring it, but this is if anyone has a Shulchan Aruch that has Kuf Yud Chet, I'm looking at Seif Yud Aleph here. I'll read out loud and read slowly. The whole case in Kuf Yud Chet is the whole case of essentially basar ne'elam min ha'ayin, right? What happens if you have a non-Jew who has access to your meat? Are they going to switch it out? Do you trust them? And so forth. All right. And as you can imagine, this is going to be a case of I have a kira. Remember, kira for people who either it's been a while they've done Hilchot Shabbat or they don't remember, they've never done Hilchot Shabbat, is an oven, not an oven, I call it like a kind of a stove with two slots in it, one for each pot, and under has one continuous fire for both of them, right? So they're both right next to each other, cooking, and they're open. And so I'm going to read from the Shulchan Aruch. Yisrael ve'oved kochavim sheshaftu shtei kederot zo etzel zo. So if they put if a Jew and a non-Jew put a pot one next to each other, right? Zeh basar shluta v'zeh basar nevela. So one has kosher meat, one has unkosher meat. Mutar, that's permissible. Ve'ein lachush shema keshechzir Yisrael panav hechlifa oved kochavim shluta b'nevela. And what we aren't concerned is like, I'm going to turn my head to go, I don't know, do something else in the kitchen. And he's going to pull the Princess Bride thing where he's going to switch the two. I don't know if you have seen the Princess Bride, probably everybody here, right? He's going to switch the two pots on me. Why? He says, Afilu im shel Yisrael mishubach, right? Maybe even yours is better. We're still not concerned, right? He may say, that Jew's pot smells really good and mine, my meat's not as good. So he might switch it on us. We're not so worried about that. We're not worried about that. Mutar, but here, this is the more important part for our topic. Even if they're uncovered, right? It's mutar. Where we're not afraid that like sparks or little, droplets are going to go from one to the other and kind of mix in. And that would be a concern that you can imagine happening here. At these two next to each other is kind of spitting little pieces onto each other. But the Ramah, of course, jumps in and he says, "V'hu adin b'shtei devarim sluyim zeh etzel zeh." It's the same rule for two things roasted next to each other. Aval lechatchila yesh li zaher afilu b'shtei kederot. But for lechatchila, we should be careful. Doesn't say you shouldn't do it. He said you should be careful. So probably he doesn't want you to do it lechatchila. All right, I will, unless there are any questions, I will end there.
Would that also apply to basar b'chalav, or is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking that too, and I didn't have a chance to look to see if I have to imagine. Basar b'chalav is, yeah. I can't think of why it wouldn't be, but and then we have the Ramah again, who would say, right, yesh li zaher lechatchila. But I mean, that could be a real. I have had things where, like, I think we've all seen this, and we'll get to this later, right? Where something like boils over, which he doesn't get to hear, right? If it boils over from a pot and then has liquid going from one pot to the next, that could be problematic. Rav Nachum, I'm not sure if you're talking to us or not. Okay, yeah. So we'll talk about cases of what happens when, like an Isur liquid actually comes up and is very hot and touches your pot, which is a whole different story. So. And I will turn it over from there. So.
All right, thank you very much, Joel.
Of course.
Excellent, good work, and good work to everybody. Let's continue in Sif Bet. Maybe Asher, you want to read?
באמת דברים אמורים בצלי, אבל אם בא לבשלם בקדרה זה לעצמו וזה לעצמו, אפילו בתנור קטן ופיו סתום, מותר. ואף על פי שפי הקדרות מגולה.
So what's the case?
So he's saying what the whole thing that we just went through with first halakha, what are we talking about? We're talking about only b'tzli. But if you're coming to I guess to cook something in a pot, two things in a pot,
In
two
oven,
things
in an oven.
in an oven, two things in separate pots in the oven,
Right.
one next to each other. It's each in its own pot, even if it's a small oven, even if it's a closed oven, not one of those open back or open side ovens, then it's okay.
Even if it's
even if the mouth of the mouths of the pots are open, so even if they're not completely totally covered.
and even if the oven
Okay.
is small and the
And if
oven
the
is
oven's
sealed,
small and the oven is sealed, right, which we already said.
which
And-
right. So
Okay.
you sure? So so we discussed last week, actually, what does this mean? Mivashel, livashel, what does that mean? In other words, is it Dafka talking about water? Is he juxtapositioning sli with boiling things in a pot? Because when they're in a pot, they're obviously going to be having some liquid collecting in the bottom of the pot. Or is he not talking about, is the key factor boiling or something else? So if you look at let's look at the Shach, Tet Zion. So here, why don't you read that Asher also?
Okay, אבל אם בא לבשלם וכולי, התורה בשם הרשב"א סיים הטעם שאין ריח מהבשלים כל כך אוסר, עד כאן לשונו.
Stop.
בית יוסף, okay.
Stop there.
Okay.
So what does the Rashba say?
So Torah quotes the Rashba saying that reach doesn't really affect things that are cooking.
That are boiling. The key factor is boiling. Right. That are vashlim. There's not so much reach by boiling. When you roast some meat, you really can smell it. Like, we would roast the korbanot in the temple, and God would have a reach nichoach. He would have a beautiful smell. Reach comes from roasting things, and you can smell from a distance the smell of a barbecue. I always say if my neighbor makes a barbecue, he has to offer me something because otherwise he's teasing me. The smell is very roasting, is very strong. Boiling, you don't smell it as strong. That's the Rashba's opinion, and therefore he says the whole din only applies in roasting, and not by boiling. And therefore, this case is mutter. But now, continue on.
Okay, והבית יוסף בסימן צדיק זין, הקשה, הקשה על זה, והוכיח מש"ס,
אפילו.
Hold on. When I lose my place here. Somehow this is not, oh, I see, I'm sorry. The shach is on both sides of the page here. I was confused. ויוכיח מש"ס, דאפילו נצלה בקטרה אינו אוסר, עין שם. ואולי לזה השמיט...
Wait, so stop. That was a key point.
Okay. So the Beit Yosef has a problem with that, and he says, and he proves from the Shas that even something that's roasted in the ketera doesn't
right.
Oser.
In other words, the pot is not like we thought that it's because it's boiling, but even dry things, as long as there are two, like imagine trays, maybe that's a better case. If you have two trays of roasting of hot, dry things, no problem, because they're in separate trays, even though the smell is going to be strong because it's roasting, but they're in separate pots. The smell is not going to infuse the other one because the smell is, as it spreads out, that's not what we're worried about. We're maybe worried only about the immediate vicinity. And once you have a wall of a pot and another pot, two trays, then they're not in the immediate vicinity, and we're not worried about smell. That's what the Beis Yosef. So he's saying, no, even roasting and kol shekain boiling. I'm just pointing out this is a debate about what it means even mivashlim. But of course, the Beit Yosef is the one who writes the mechaber here. So presumably he means what the Beit Yosef means. Presumably, although not always. We have seen that sometimes the Beit, as Rav Landy says, We have seen sometimes that the Beit Yosef argues very strongly in one way, and then copies the Torah anyway, and copies the words of the Torah anyway. So let's continue with a little bit more.
But I want to ask, Nachum, I want to ask you, so are we actually dealing with the fact a push on one side, or maybe a minor side, that Reach is Tam? And now can we say that the other side is saying Reach is only a warning that Tam is around, but Reach is not Tam itself?
Well, which side are you? Which side is which? Help me out there.
The majority opinion that we don't consider Reach, we consider Reach as a nothing, is saying, well, we know it's something, but it's not Tam. It functions only for us to be more careful.
Well, I mean, right
And
now
therefore, when you have it in the oven, you just make sure that the two don't touch.
You're saying as long as it's not Tom, then any little division is enough to give a heter. Okay, yeah.
And what is it? But then according to that shita, what is it? Therefore, I'm suggesting it's a indication that something. It's the horn beeping. It's indication that something is present. All right. I just was looking for. I was looking for. So, what is it according to the shita that it's nothing? Is it really nothing?
It's nothing, even if you don't have a pot, according to that opinion. We're
Right.
all in the. We're now discussing the opinion where it is something, and then he would hold it's only something when it's a serious infusion because there's a close proximity between the two pieces of meat, or the two.
Okay. I'm fine.
Once you have a slight smell, in other words, maybe the smell has to almost border on taste. It has to be so proximal that it actually gets close to being a taste. Once you have a wall separating it of two pots, even it's roasting, we're not worried about smell going up and down. We're worried about direct smell going across.
Okay.
I have a problem with all of this. I have a problem with all of this because to me, the concept is really, when I take that food out and I smell it, just like we can go to a goy and ask him to taste it, we can go to a Jew and ask him to smell it. And he can just say, I smell it or I don't smell it. When I take this broccoli out, do I smell pork on it? Then I have reach milta. So then, if I hold that reach is milta and I have reach now on the broccoli, it should be us. If I hold reach is not milta, then who cares that it smells like pork? But I don't understand all these trying to come up with rules. Why can't we just smell it?
Because I think it's a question of whether Recha is an agent of Tom, right? Like it's not right. The Recha exists. Like there's no doubt denying that there is some sort of smell, right? So the question is, okay, I smell the pork on the broccoli. Do we now then say, okay, since I smell the pork on the broccoli, that means some sort of Tom has entered the broccoli? Or do we say, no, smell is its own category and it can't be an agent of Tom?
You're saying I think what I hope you're saying, what maybe you're saying is, reach is not milta. And the only reason we're going to usher it is if reach is some kind of indicator to us that there's some Tom here. And therefore we're 100% positive. But I don't think that's what's really going on. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I wish that was what was going on. I don't know if that's what's going on. I think what's going on is that reach is not milta, but maybe it is milta. And then in these cases, it is milta. In these cases, it's not milta. Maybe your answer is really what's going on in the back of their mind, but nobody said anything like that. Nobody connected it to Tom, as far as I saw.
But there are times that we know just in our own lives that reach does equal Tom. I mean, we were talking about this during the review last Wednesday. I remember growing up, my mother used to make broiled fish over hickory chips.
If you hold your nose.
The smell of the hickory chips.
Taste the food. Tom,
well, that's true. That's true anyway. But I'm saying this, the smell of the hickory chips would go into the fish. We could taste that hickory.
Yeah, sure. But that, oh, well, taste is a complicated thing. It's a very complicated thing.
But
What
that's
is
what it is.
taste?
It was
If-
the taste came from the smell of the hickory chips.
If you would be, if I would, my kid would ask me what is taste, I would say, actually, there's only 5 or maybe 6 tastes, salt, sour, sweet, bitter, and umami, whatever it is. That's all there are is tastes. And then
I feel
everything
like
else.
that's like not a useful colloquial definition, because when we say taste, like, yes, that is what taste is, or taste buds taste. When we say taste, we mean the sensation I experience in my mouth when I consume something, I feel like. And that includes the way that smell impacts.
Right, but I think I think that, no, I agree with you. I think that, but really taste is what gives, so I was about to say, what differentiates pork from meat? They're both umami or whatever. So what differentiates it is the smell. When we eat, we do a full experience of seeing, also seeing. If you see the food looks bad, it doesn't taste as good. There's a relationship between smelling and the way it smells different affects the way you perceive tastes. I agree with that 100%. But what I think the Gemara was talking about is saying, what if I just have smell, and in other words, it smells like pork, but it clearly tastes like broccoli. I'm able to distinguish those things. What's the din then? And the Gemara is asking, according to what opinion? Well, smell is nothing. The taste is all we care. If you can distinguish, and according to the other opinion, no, smell is a problem, even when it's isolated from taste. But what's going on here in the Shulchan Aruch is a different thing, because here in the Shulchan Aruch, we're trying to we're paskening that there's that flavor, that only flavor is a problem. That smell's not a problem. But we're worried maybe it is a problem. So in certain cases, we worry about it. And I just don't understand why we worry about it in certain cases. In other words, it's like if it's that case, then when you have the smell, it's a problem. Because that case is like so serious. So then the smell becomes a problem. It's a very strange world we're in, I think. Joel, you want to say something?
Well, I've been working on this thought, and I don't know if it's fully developed yet, but like the question of whether or not is reach really a question about the reach itself, or is a question of like, when I have two things exchanging reach, are they being cooked together? And cooking together, we know is an exchange of tam, or is at least problematic, whether or not it's tam that's the problematic. And the moment you put right, because you imagine two things in an oven with a bunch of reach going around is almost, there is some similarity to putting them in the pot together, that when they're unbounded. And the moment you put them in separate pots, you undo that fact. They're no longer being cooked together. And that might be the actual concern, as opposed to.
Yeah, again, nobody's saying that. It makes sense, but nobody's saying that. All we're seeing here is like technical analysis. In this case, I do say it. In this case, I don't say it, because in this case, it's like a more severe version of reach. It's like, that seems what it is. It's like a more severe cases of reach, we're going to consider it to be a thing.
Yeah, there was one Taz that kind of tipped me off on that.
Oh yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Sif Katan Vav, we didn't do it inside, I don't think. This was the whole question where he says that everything in the Tanur can become to Mevatel the Isur if for a 60-to-1 ratio. So like, I have 60 pieces, let's say, of equally sized meat that are kosher, one piece of unequally, and one piece of the same size that's not kosher, and they're all in the same oven together, that would count as a 60-to-1. And so the Taz says, he says, "Yesh lanu lamar she'ein litztaref latam da'afilu b'tzliya amrinan ein isur balui at semi chaticha lechaticha below rotev." Right? That's what you would say. The Havamina is like, no, we don't say that. He says, "Makom makom berecha yesh lakel mitam dekol hanichnas besafek mesayel levatel." Right? He says, but here's the safek, so everything in safek will help. But already, I think he's hinting at. He doesn't say it directly, of this idea of like, it's like somehow this thing becomes a continuous stew in the oven between everything. I'm pushing it.
You're pushing
it.
Because it's not the suffix, it's just the concept that we, I don't know if we saw it or we will see it, which is like, if you don't know where the thing, you know that we're going to see it actually next Siman. You have a dry mixture. You have three of them are kosher and one is not kosher. And one of them is in the attic, One of them is in the cellar. One of them is in the living room. One is in the dining room. They're all in different places, but I know that 3 of them are kosher and 1 of them's not. So do I call it all one mixture? So we say, since they're all nichnas b'oto safek, they're all the same safek is on all of them. Which one is the kosher, is the treif one? Therefore, they can work together, even though they're physically not connected. That's all he's saying here. He's just saying
Okay.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
tried.
yeah, you tried. I think it's very technical here. But anyway, let's go on. In that Taz, we're in that where were we? Taz? Sorry. In the Shach Tet Zion.
ואולי לזה השמיט סיום דברי הרשב"א, לומר, דלא תעלה מידי בריח הבישול או צלי, רק בהפסק הקטרה. So maybe, okay, so maybe the final words of the Rashba were actually left off of this whole, in this diyun, to say that it's lo tali midei bareach habishul lo tzli. It doesn't depend on the smell of the bishul or the tzli, only on if there's a hefsek of the kedera.
Right. In other words, we don't. What he's saying is that maybe he's saying maybe that's what the Rashba, maybe that's why he quoted only part of the Rashba. That's what he's saying. But the point is that that's the all I wanted to see. But the point is that there's 2 different ways to understand it, and the way the Beit Yosef actually seems to understand it is that as long as there's mafsik, and that's the halacha. The halacha is that even if it's no liquid, 2 separate pots are considered not to be giving reach one to the other, even if it's dry roasting. And I am supplying you the logic of it. The logic of it is that there's no direct infusion from one to the other. Okay, let's continue in the Ramah now. Right, we read just the Mechaber. So,
right.
So as long as I got you, Asher, you're doing a great job. Keep reading.
אוקיי, אגב, דווקא שהתנור פתוח קצת, אבל אם הוא סתום מכל הצדדים כדרך שמטמינים החמים לצורך שבת, אסור. So this is true only if the tanor is a little bit open, but if it is completely closed off from every side, the way that we usually do when we make our chamin on Shabbat, then it's asur.
He's like a little bit pushing back from the Mechaber. Mechaber say, but even a closed oven. He says, well, not if you sealed it with cement. I think they would actually seal their ovens with dough. They would, in other words, they wanted to keep every bit of the heat in the oven so that Shabbos morning they would have warm cholent. So they wouldn't just close the door of the oven; they would close it and seal it totally, with no cracks. In that case, he's not going to allow it. Why?
Right.
It's a little bit more.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
ואפילו בדיעבד יש מאחרונים ואוסרים אם האיסור וההיתר מגולה. And even b'diavad, there are those who are more stringent to forbid it if both pieces, both the isur and the heter, are uncovered.
This is all talking about. I believe this is all talking about where the oven is totally sealed, like you would do for your Shabbos to keep the heat in.
Right. But then he gives our favorite back out. But if it's a significant financial loss, then you can be a little more making.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. That even though it's a small oven and all of that in separate pots, but it should have some kind of cracks. I would say, and nowadays our ovens do have some kind of cracks. They're not perfectly sealed, the way you would want it to be if you wanted to make it into like a thermos, Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back with Gimel Dal Hey Vav and Zion. Taking a break here for a few minutes. We'll come back in a few minutes. who went to his Rav, and his Rav told him, no, you don't really don't do the chisun, better just shave al tase, don't do anything. So he listened to his Rav, and a guy came to shul and coughed on him, who knew he had corona. And this guy, he wasn't really my friend, but he was a coworker of mine, and he was 59, healthy guy, more or less, and was hospitalized and lung machine, and he died. Died like 2 days ago.
Nachum, I'm
That I
very,
missed.
this is a horrific story.
Yeah, it's terrible. I
I
can't
don't, I
believe
don't
that
know
he's
who to be angrier
irresponsible.
at, the Rav or the guy who went to shul knowing he had
His
corona.
son,
I'm not
his
sure who to
son
be
is
more
very
angry.
angry. His son is angry at both, and I
He
would
should
be
be.
angry certainly at both. Yeah. I don't understand. You sound so chacham when you say, "Oh, shave al tasa," just let's see how things are. You sound like you're very wise and even and even keeled, but you're responsible. Anyway, so that his name is Ezra Chai ben Chatun. His Shama should have an aliyah. He was actually apparently a very big tzaddik. He would teach Torah, and he was teaching computers, and he was makdish his time to the rabbim in every possible way. He would go around and teach little kids on Shabbat. And anyway, so let us continue. We are in Gimel. Lexi, maybe you want to read.
Sure. Okay, so אם יש שמרנית של איסור על מרדה שקוראים פלה, אסור ליתן עליה היתר כל היום, מיהו כשאינה בת יומה מותר להשתמש בה, משום דאי אפשר בעניין אחר. So we have this like mardeh, this like baker's peel / like shovel thing.
Right, I drew a little picture of it. It's what I imagine. It's like what you.
I was imagining it like with pizza ovens, like that big thing that slide it in on. Yeah,
it's exactly a pizza oven. It's one of those pizza oven spatulas, but the pizza oven spatulas are metal at the end. This one is all wood.
Yeah, so they're using this like if it has like literal fat still on it, it is usser to use anything. But when it's an Eina Bat Yoma, like lichatchila, I'm allowed to use it, even though that's not the case with most things, because like not everyone can have a big baker's peel. Like there isn't. It's not like, oh, why are you using this like not kosher one when you could just have a kosher one? It's like no, there's like one baker's peel, and this is it. And so, like, we're gonna allow this.
He won't. So look at Zion. Read Zion.
In the Taz?
Yeah.
The Sorli Tenala Heter Kolayom. So basically Beheter Vilklal Shasura Afila Biti Eved. Im Hutziu Haovet Kochavim Min Hatanor Al Kli Echad Ugot Im Pashtita Shal Isor Zem Acher Kach Mihu Lo Asar Ela HaPat HaRishon Shiadua Bibi Ror Shotziu Humiad Acher Pashtita Mishum Shamnonit Shal Isor Shal HaMardeh אם אין מכירו חד בתרי בטל, אף על גב דבר ראוי להתכבד, ואין איסורו מגופו, אם היא אינה בת יומה, פשיטא דאינה אוסרת. וכתב רש"ב.
Stop. That's all.
Right. So it's basically like this, even like this kula within when it is like bat yoma, that like lichatchila, I shouldn't be using it when it's bat yoma. But if I did, then the first thing that's cooked with it is usser, because we definitely think it got some isser fat on it. But like things after that, actually b'diavad, we don't think are usser. And even that first thing that became usser because the fat on it can be like batel barov.
Right. So in other words, exactly, it's a kind of a chiddush, because why should this piece, that the first one got it all. Actually, some poskim argue on this opinion. Who says maybe the second one also got, maybe the third one also got, but we're holding no. The first one got all the fat, and
it just feels like there's this like big inclination amongst the poskim to be makil in this case out of like practical considerations, where they're like, you don't have another option. Like if you're
right.
trying to make something that requires this tool, like it's not like, oh, you should have just kosher. And they also, right, and they mentioned that one of the other reasons that comes up in the toast vote that like we're making on this is it's not like, oh, you're just being like lazy and not koshering it. It's like there are non-Jews using it too, and they're not going to agree to you koshering it between like every usage.
Well, it's not
They're
more
like,
than that. There's also a problem. You can't kosher. Why can't you cannot
right,
kosher?
you can't
Because
do
why?
or klipa, it would require libum because it's like the heat of the fire is how it's used.
Exactly. It's
So
exactly.
like
So
I can't properly kosher it, and I can't even do like a really like I can't use a new one every time. That's just not, I can't do that. But like, okay,
so wait, let me just, you're a little bit mikuta. You're a little bit not every word was heard. So let me just repeat what you said, which is that that since it's wood, you would really have to do libun on it because it was worked in a hot oven. It wasn't boiled. You didn't put it in boiling water. So therefore you do libun. Libun means you have to get it red hot. If you get wood red hot, well, you don't have your wood anymore. So you can't do libun. The other option is to, maybe do klipa, scrape off a klipa and then do hagala. But you can't do that because you have to do libun. It's not enough to do scraping off and hagala. So therefore, there's no way of koshering it. So you'd have to buy a new one. And the goy isn't going to go and buy. We're assuming that you're the assumption is that you're in a non-kosher pizza oven at a pizza place, and you're just asking him to, you just made your bread, and you're coming over to the nachtom, you're coming over to the baker house and say, put my bread in your oven for me. And he uses his thing. Now, the question is, why is the fat, wait a second, is the fat, he says the fat is bidievid, is noten tam gam, right? Did we say that? Let's read that again.
where?
No. If it's not ben yomo, mihu, kshe'eno bat yomo, mutter. Why? Why is it mutter?
Right. I mean, it's like our general status, like it's our general assumption with kalim, which is that like when they're ben yomo, they're not saying tamid kam.
But it's fatty.
But that's for absorbed things, not for things visible on it. Right?
Exactly.
Is the assumption here that we still have like crusted fat on it?
Yeah, sure. You didn't clean it. You've got fat on it. And if that's the case,
like, is that something I couldn't clean? It feels kind of different to me to say, okay, yes, we get that you can't kosher it between uses. That's literally not possible. Like, would it be impossible to like
get the guy to clean it?
Literal fat on it?
You're right. You could ask the guy to clean it, or you could ask him if you can clean it for him and say, don't use it until I come back tomorrow morning, and then I'm gonna, use it. Rely on Rashi, who says that linat laila is enough.
Isn't there
but we saw, but does anybody
like mama shoot?
But does anybody remember
say that mama shoot doesn't become tamid gam?
Oh, wait. So normally we say mama shoot does not become tamid gam. Can anybody remember an exception to that? We learned?
Korbanot.
I didn't learn that, but you learned that.
It's like ibor tzarato. We say that that's actually like where they're learning the linat laila thing from. Is like ibor tzarato is from the korbanot, where we say.
I mean, in the Shulchan Aruch and the Nosei Kelim that we saw before. So I remember that we saw such a thing, and it is in Siman Kuf Gimel. Taz Het brings that a fatty film. We can look at there if you want. Let's go there. So Siman Kuf Gimel, Taz Het. So if you go back, Kuf Gimel, it wasn't so long ago that we learned that. Well, it was actually. By now, it's been a while. So it's good. I like to review what I think are important pieces of tidbits of information. That this is a kind of how do you say agree? I would egregious means out of the flock in Latin. I studied Latin, so it's an egregious, it's an unusual taz because it kind of goes against the normal halacha that we would think of, that it has to be clean for it to be tamid gam. So if you look at this taz chet in Siman Kuf Gimel, he says, "Demashu be'ain eino nifgam afilu nishtaheh kama yamim." That's the halacha that we know. Several days it won't help. If it's really ba'ain, v'zeu dat rashba v'tur Siman Kuf Kaf Bet. V'yesh matirin. Oh, we read about yesh matirin hu aran. The spherale da afilu mashe ba'ain ala kli nifgam. Manan kind of like Svara Rishona. So we don't hold like the Ron, but there is this Ron out there. In other words, there's this Ron out there who says even the film is going to be nifgam. So I'm wondering if that's kind of what's going on here, because maybe we're relying in this case where maybe we don't know if there really is such a film or how much of the film is, and maybe he used some bread on it before. Maybe the case is unclear, and so we can rely on that Ron. That's my proposition to answer how come we care that it's Einu Binyama. Okay, continue, please. Wait, everyone had you can argue with me. You can argue with me on that, Ron?
I mean, it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch as a Yesh Omrim, right? It's not just the Taz bringing it, like it actually does come down. So.
Right, okay. That's not an arguing on me. Okay, so continue, Lexi. Just read a little bit the Ramah.
The Ramah basically just says what we were talking about earlier, where he says, Kol zman shehi bat yoma, lo mahane bahagala, v'lo klipa b'kli umanut. That I can't kosher it with hagala or with like fancy klipa.
Right.
At least while it's bat yoma, he says.
No, but kli omanut, I think he means, what he means there is a kli of an expert.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying fancy.
Fancy klipa.
No, not a fancy klipa. No, it's not
I
the
know.
klipa
As
is
in like
fancy.
a fancily done klipa.
I don't think that's what he means. I think what he means is klipa is not sufficient on a vessel, which is a professional vessel, which is this particular professional vessel for taking your pizzas out of your oven. But anyway, whatever. Just a technical point.
See, I was
No,
reading
no,
it
I
as
think-
klipa bik omanut, as
A
in like a
klipa-
klipa done with the kli omanut, and specifically.
Lo hagala v'lo
the grammar
klipa
of it-
b'kli omanut.
Like lo mahane. As
Okay,
in,
maybe
lo
you're saying like
mahane
that.
Ba hagala, lo klipa b'kli omanut.
I read the b as regarding. I read the b as regarding, and you're reading the b as with. Maybe you're right. I don't know.
A kli omanut can't have a klipa done to it because it will destroy it.
That's what I understood. That's what I understood.
Therefore, since it will destroy it, we don't trust a person to do a proper klipa.
Oh, excellent. You are MFR.
It just feels like weird. It feels
A
like a
kli
weird way of
omanut
saying
could
it.
be any form of kli omanut. It could be a dentist's utensil. It could be even a baker's utensil. But again, the klipa won't fix it because you will never do the klipa. You will destroy it as a kli omanut.
Yeah, the but you just have to read it as regarding. Okay, let's continue. Oh, kaf. I want to say kaf.
Wait, but weren't we saying that would never work because you need libun, and here it's saying kozman shi bat yoma, which is in general the case. We can't kasher things when it's bat yoma, right? So it's a different.
Well, that's also true, but once it's bat
believe you
yoma,
can.
once it's eno bat yoma, we don't need to do anything. We just got a het there already.
Right.
But libun
I don't think I agree with you. The first way you want him to see, or you think he's about to say, oh, well, you need to wait 24 hours before you do a gala. But it's not what he's saying in this case, I don't think. I think he's saying, Kol's manchi bat yoma, and therefore usser, you can't do anything else. You could do, by the way, libun, you don't have to wait 24 hours. Libun, you do immediately. And the truth is, hagala, you could do immediately. The only reason we wait 24 hours is because we're worried you don't have 60 times the water has to be 60 times the thing that you're kashering in order for hagala to work, unless the kli is ben yomo, is eno ben yomo. So therefore we don't do that because we're worried that maybe you don't have a big enough pot. Theoretically, if you had a big pot, you could actually do hagala immediately. Now I want to look at kaf in the Shach. Here, it's short, so Lexi, why don't you read it?
the Yud Tet. Mm.
Oh, actually, you know what? We don't need to do. I said it outside. I said it outside.
Oh, cup, sorry, yeah.
I said it outside. So let's go on. Noam, why don't you read David in the Machaber?
Great. All right. Pat chama shemunachad al gabei chavit ptucha shel yain nesach asura, v'davka imunachat neged hamegufa. So a hot bread that is placed on an open barrel of yain nesach, the bread's forbidden. The Ramah adds that specifically when it's placed on like opposite the opening or the plug.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Actually, I didn't. Maybe you understand it better than I do. I don't understand. What do you mean?
Yeah, what I understood is you have a barrel that has a slit, like it's mostly closed, but then there is a small opening next to it. So what he's saying is, if the bread is on top of that opening, you're fine. But if it's on the other side of the barrel, you're not, sorry, if it's opposite that little opening, you're not fine. But if you slide it over, it's no longer opposite the hole, then you're fine.
But megufe means closed, doesn't it?
I think it can also mean the hole that you use
It's right. It's referring to the plugged
Oh.
hole.
Yeah.
Right.
Ah. In other words, you're saying opposite the plug that isn't there.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, if you have an open barrel, but you put it on, like you're saying, imagine, okay, I think I got what you're saying. There's like the lid of the barrel is, let's say, 2 meters in diameter, 2 feet in diameter. And in the middle, there's a hole for a cork. If you put the bread on the side, on the top, even if the cork is open, it doesn't matter. It's only if you put it mamish over the hole where the cork would fit in. Okay, you have enlightened me.
Aval im hapat sonenet afilu im hachavit ptucha o chama v'chavit megufa perush stuma mutar. But if the bread is cold, even when the barrel is open, or if the bread is hot and the barrel is sealed up, then the bread is permitted. V'im haya pat sorim asor im hapat chama afilu chavit megufa. But if the bread is barley bread, then it's forbidden. And if the bread is hot, even if the barrel is sealed up.
So, okay, so can you summarize that? What's the case that's a problem? What's the problematic case?
Right, the problematic case is hot and open. The problematic case is hot and open, and as long as one of those two conditions isn't met, then you're okay, except in a case of barley bread, right?
Okay, so look at kaf. Let's look at now kaf aleph in a shach.
All right, in the shach. Pat chama chule mipnei sheshoev hareach shel yain. It's because the smell it absorbs the smell of the wine. The afal gav de el seif aleph katav im silaan hareze mutar v'haposkim midamim shnei dinim elu lahadade mikol makom ha-tosfa v'arosh katvu lahedya perik bratra davodat kochavim daf samach vad de lo dame lahadade v'chen hu b'raiven daf ayin daled amud daled. That's weird. Ushar poskim achronim. So he says that this is because the bread absorbs the wine, and even though earlier we learned that that in the case of roasting, like in an analogous case of roasting, it would be permitted because all the poskim.
Wait, so wait a second.
Sort of,
I just want to put this. This is a kasha. He's asking a big kasha. This is a weird din that why is this bread asur? After all, the mechaber paskin reach is not milta. So what do I care that this reach is getting on my bread? Reach is on a milta. And the worst case is like roasting, but roasting is mutter. So why is this usher at all? That's what he's asking. He says, in Afal Gav that he paskined in Sif Aleph, the reich is not a milta. Why is he saying here the bread is usher? Kasha. So for that, I want to look at the thing I sent you an email, which is the Aruch, which is a wonderful book. A bit lengthy. It's hard. It's always hard for me to say it's a wonderful book, even though I feel that way, because I like the Chachmat Adam, but the Chachmat Adam, because the Chachmat Adam is my family. But I think the Chachmat Adam would agree that this is a wonderful book. So even though it's the competition, what does it say? Kinat Sofrim Tarbe Chachma. That means
Okay, what are we looking at now? I'm
we were looking
sorry.
at what I sent an email earlier today to the group. It's the Aruch HaShulchan Kaf Gimel.
Okay.
So does everybody have it, or do you want me to share a screen? Isaac, you have it? You have it? Lexi, you have it? Lexi? You got it? Okay. So Noam, why don't you read? He's here. He's referring to the Beit Yosef, but we can think of it in terms of the Mechaber. Go ahead.
All right. V'divrei Rabbeinu HaBeit Yosef b'sif Daled Tmuhim binyan zeh shekatav
Tamuhim. Wait, did you read that right? Tamuhim. They're surprising.
Yeah, right. Binyan zeh shekatav pachama shemunachat al gabei chavit petucha shel yain nesach asura v'davka imunachat neged hamigufa aval im hapat sonen afilu im hachavit petucha o pat chama v'chavit stuma mutar. Bim haya pat sorim asor im hapat chama afilu chavit stuma ad kan l'shano. V'harei ihu pasak b'sif aleph karif v'arambam derecha lav miltahi.
That's the kasha. Just let me slow you down. That's the kasha. He paskined already the reich lav milta. So why is he saying it's a problem here? Go ahead.
Ukfar tamahu alav hagdolim, so the Pri Chadash and the Kreti Ufleti. V'tzarich lomar de memra zo kevan ditmara begemara stama dechama uftucha asor v'sonenet ustuma mutar v'chama ustuma v'sonenet uftucha machloket de Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi.
Wait, so stop there. Right.
So this all goes back to the sugya in Avodah Zarah, where it sort of says these things all unqualified, right?
Yeah, very good.
Right, that it sort of lays out these general rules, and there's like no explanation. Everyone agrees that when it's totally open and hot, you've got a problem, and that when it's totally closed and cold, everyone's fine. But it's those middle cases when one of the conditions is met when there's a machloket.
So go on.
Uman de Amar zo lo tale la plugata derecha shma mina de la kule amahi. So according to the one who says, and I think when we were looking at these,
Manda Amar Maimer is the one who brought this whole statement.
Right.
He first said the Stam statement
that this is not incumbent upon, or is not contingent upon the machloket as to whether Reicha is milta here or not. It's
right. In other words, this statement was that apparently the whole world agrees about the first part of this statement, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch has to paskin like that. He has to paskin that if you have a barrel of wine and you have this bread, it's going to osir it if it's hot, because that's the Gemara. You can't escape the Gemara. And the only machloket about Reicha Milta is in these other cases, where it's not such a severe case as it being hot and open. We just finished the end. V'lechen
pasak k'meim razo uflugata detana per pasak k'Rabbi Yossi dalach kemoto neged Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda. All right, so therefore the Shulchan Aruch has to paskin like this statement, because it's a Tanaitic dispute, and we always rule by like Rabbi Yossi in those cases against Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda.
Right. Wait a second. That's the end part. He paskined in Sif Aleph, like, what is it, Rabbi Yossi? So that Reicha Lav Milta. But the original stam of the Gemara, he also has to paskin. Apparently, so I mean, the Torah to me, the Aruch HaShulchan is explaining very nicely. He's basing it on the Kreiki Plati, but he's still not giving us a rationale, right? We're a little bit missing a rationale. Can you? So
Well,
so no, you will supply that.
Well, I don't know if there's a rationale, but going back to the sugya, right? When the question is like whether we passing like Rava or we passing like Levi, has to do whether we read those two sugyot in conversation with each other or whether they're independent. So as soon as the Shulchan Aruch paskins halacha kelevi, right, or for all intents and purposes, right, he's divorcing the sugya about the barrel of wine from the general conversation of reicha, which means he can then stake out an independent ruling there,
right,
regardless of how you rule about reicha.
Right. So, I mean, agreed. That's just a technical ability to paskin like this without it being a contradiction. And that's what the Shach said, that whether these two dinim are, he said, are they damim shnei hadinim elu lahadadi? Are they connected or not? Maybe they're independent, like you're saying. They're independent dinim, and therefore you can paskin differently. But we still don't have a good rationale. But there is one. I mean, I can't offer a real rationale, maybe, but I can offer a hint at a rationale that here we're thinking about avodah zarah. It's not a stam reach; it's a reach of avodah zarah, and maybe avodah zarah is aser behanaa, and maybe reach is not a milta, but it is a hanaa. In other words, it's not a milta, but you do get some kind of enjoyment from it. I mean, we use besamim on Motzei Shabbat because it's enjoyable. So maybe maybe that helps explain this thing. Joel?
I was thinking about that, and I have something, and then I may counter it as well. But because basar b'chalav, we also ruled that reicha lav miltahi, and basar b'chalav has an isur b'hana in it. But I guess you could say it's the hana. There's no isur of the hana of the milk getting into the meat. It's the isur of hana from the milk meat combination. Maybe that's the only thing we're worried about. So if you cook the two together, then maybe it's still not a problem. I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, without getting too complicated, I might just say that the type of hana'ah that's prohibited by avodah zarah might be a more stringent type of hana'ah than by milk and meat. Even though it's a strange statement to say, but it might be true because, like the hana'ah that you can't have for milk and meat. I mean, if I enjoy looking at milk and meat, I mean, that might not be prohibited. The hana'ah, whereas enjoying looking at an idol might be prohibited. The hana'ah in general is financial hana'ah by milk and meat, or tasting and eating, that kind of direct hana'ah. Mm-hmm. But fine, you're right. It's a good question. But let's go on. That was Dalet, right? We finished Dalet? Second, yeah. So let's do Hey. Isaac, you want to read Hey, or you're not in a position, Isaac?
Everything is currently covered by my cat, so.
Okay. Cat can't read for us. Josh, I don't know how your internet connection is, but you could try, or it's not.
Bezrat Hashem. Should we try? Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. Hey. מותר לשאוף בפיו ריח יין נסך דרך נקב שבחבית לידע אם הוא טוב. So you're allowed to take in smells in your mouth of Yein Neser through here it says that through a gap in the cask in order to know if the wine is fully matured.
Now this is Yayin Neser. This is back to our Avodah Zarah question. This is Yayin Neser, and you're putting in your mouth. Certainly in your nostrils is also allowed, but even in your mouth is a chumrah, is more of a chiddush. The smell, and that's mutar. That's not hana'ah, and that's mutar. All right, continue.
אבל אסור לתואמו, אף על פי שאינו בולעו. So you can't taste it. You can't taste the wine and spit it out.
Right, even though
like
exactly.
wine tasters do.
Right, you can't do that with the Avodah Zarah wine. The Magen Avraham, the Prima Gadim. Actually, we can look there if you have it on your page. Kaf Daled. If you look at Kaf Daled, Siftei Dat is the Prima Gadim. Kaf Daled. The Prima Gadim is also the Mishpasot Zav and also the Siftei Dat. So in the Siftei Dat Kaf Daled, he says, Ayin Shach, the kol Isser Achila Asur Litomo, Hen Belashon, O Toem Upolet, Midirabanan, Atu Achila, because you might eat it. The rabbinic prohibition. So in other words, there's two kinds of tasting. And actually there is a whole discussion we discussed 2 years ago when we learned something else. Maybe we'll discuss it again, I don't know, but about whether you can taste bad taste or something, but like bitter, like the bile. It's a halacha if you broke the bile in the animal, whatever. Anyway, the point is both types of tasting, whether you just stick your tongue in it or where you don't actually eat it, you just stick your tongue into the wine and pull your tongue out, or you put some in your mouth and then spit it out. Both of those are prohibited. Okay, so that was the actually we should have, I guess, looked at Kaf Daled in
Nafka mina for toothpaste.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Assuming it's food, right? That's the other big question with toothpaste that comes up, right? Is it even food?
Yeah, I don't know. But this is the kol Isser Achila. Anything that's usher to eat. It's not just about a zara. Anything that's usher to eat, you can't taste it in any way. Now, maybe toothpaste is mucher to eat because it's not food. The famous story I heard in the name of the Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Yosef Soloveitchik. They came to him. They said we gave Erev Pesach. We gave our toothpaste to the dog. We put it in the bowl, and we said, "Eat it," and the dog ate it. So you can't say it's not Ra'ui Lachilat Kelim. So therefore, you have to have kosher the Pesach toothpaste because the dog would eat it. It's Ra'ui Lachilat Kelim. So what is now here, if you want to know what a real Litvak would answer, what's the Litvak answer? The halachic man. What is the halachic man's answer to this question? He says, the halacha is not based on crazy dogs. In other words, the halacha is right, your dog is wrong. So
the technical term is a meshugana hunt.
Okay, thank you.
They know it's a technical term.
So that's if you're talking about eating toothpaste, I have to tell you that story. That's the point. The halach is determined by the average logical. We sit in our ivory tower and we decide, do dogs eat toothpaste? And we can answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to look out and see what dogs do. Okay, so wait. So actually, I sort of skipped the Kaf Daled, but in the shach that the Pri Megadim was talking about. But anyway, it's okay, fine. So continue on in the Ramah.
He just says that. He just says.
He just says what we just said. Yeah.
Okay, I meant to look this up. I'm not sure what lezalef yain is. Is it to sprinkle wine?
Oh, exactly. Very good. Lizalef means to sprinkle it. You sprinkle it around your room, like you would imagine doing with rose water. You maybe would take rose water and sprinkle it around your room to make the room smell nice. So
I wouldn't, but
well, you wouldn't, but Bulgarians.
Okay, so
Bulgaria is the capital of rose water.
Okay, and yenesech. אסור לזלף יין נסך שאסור בהנאה. So you can't sprinkle idolatrous wine because it's forbidden to have any benefit from it. אבל מותר לזלף סתם יינם דמותר בהנאה. But you can sprinkle all other wines. All other gentle
So here we have a great, interesting question. Is stam yeinam aser bahana'ah? And in other words, this is very relevant, because, well, I mean, I guess not really relevant, but anyway, our wine today is not going to probably be yain nesek. It's going to be stam yeinam. They didn't actually use it in avodah zarah, and Christianity probably is not avodah zarah. So even if they did use it in the Catholic Church, it might be not avodah zarah wine. So we really want to know what the din is of this wine. Is it aser bahana'ah? Can you sell it in your liquor store? That would be a halachic question. So he says, mutar bahana'ah. Great, mutar bahana'ah. Look at the shach, kaf hey.
צריך עיון. דלקמן ראש סימן קכ"ג כתב יש לאסור סתם יינן מלכתחילה בהנאה.
So we have a difference of opinion. Maybe it is aser bahana'ah. So just a second. Okay, so I'll just tell you. Oh, here it is. In the Pitchei Tshuva, look at Pitchei Tshuva Gimel.
It's a tobacco, wine-soaked tobacco.
Yes, why? Apparently they did this. I mean, I guess we have menthol tobacco, but they, I guess, had wine tobacco. Asher, you found it?
I see Pitchei Tshuva, I don't see Gimel.
It's a very little Gimel in parentheses. It's, I don't know.
For mine, I had to go back a page to get to Gimel for some reason, but if that helps, Asher, if you have the same edition I do.
Let's see.
All right, we'll start reading and you'll catch up.
I'll find it.
Josh, go for it.
עיין בשער המלך, פרק י"א מהלכות מאכלות אסורות, בעניין אבק הטיטון, שנקרא טבק, הניקח מן עובדי כוכבים, אם מותר לשאוף אותו, כי יש מפקפקים בדבר, כי לפעמים מזלפים אותו בסתם יינן.
So here he's saying you can't smoke cigarettes, not because of cancer, but because of hana'ah from stam yeinam. It's hana'ah. And it's aser bahana'ah.
It's hana from safek, right? It's sometimes they sprinkle.
Yes, the safek of stam yeinam, which is probably aser only to rabbanan, hana'ah. And therefore you can't smoke. Well, I'll take any reason that it's forbidden to smoke. Go ahead.
ערך מאוד בזה, ואלא דאף לדעת רובה דרבבתא שפסקו דסתם יינן אסור בהנאה, even though almost everyone says it's asur b'hana'ah.
In other words, here you're seeing, that's the key point that I underlined for myself. Here he's telling us that most of the poskim hold that it is asur b'hana'ah. If you're wondering, is the Shulchan Aruch right or is the Shach right? So continue. a little bit more.
It was the Ramah, right?
Sorry, the Ramah. When I said the Shulchan Aruch, I meant the Ramah. The Ramah versus the Shach is to be Machmir. The Ramah seems to be Mekil. And he's saying everybody agrees with the Shach, that it's Asur. Bahana'ah. Mikol Makom, Shari Lishof Tabak, Deze Mamash Kahi Baticha. Whatever, because we saw that it's Asur in the Baticha, it's put in the Baticha, so to say. So that's maybe not called Hana'ah. Maybe it's not called Hana'ah. But anyway, the main what I was interested in is that side point, that whether it's Asur. Now the Aruch HaShulchan, at the end of Kaf Dalet, we're not going to look at it, but the end of Kaf Dalet says that Stam Yeinam is Mutar Bahana. So we have multiple opinions. I mean, the Acharon Chaviv, and the Acharon is Aruch HaShulchan. He says it's not Asur Bahana. Okay, so which is like the Ramah. He's just passing like the Ramah. Fine. Continue. So read another one.
Okay.
Vav.
שק של פלפלים וזנגוויל שמשימים בקנקני יין נסך, מותר לארח בהם, אבל לבשמים דהבדלה אסור. So bags of pepper and ginger that were soaked in the wine, I guess in order to give it flavor. You can smell them afterwards, but you can't use them for Havdalah because that would be strange.
Right, that's actually the reason, because it would be ugly. It would be just like not mechubad way of smelling something, to smell some kind of sack of spices that were soaked in wine. It's like not proper. All right, so look at Yud. Yeah. Look at Yud in the Taz.
Is it anyone soaked in, like if it were soaked in kosher wine, would you not also not use it for Havdalah, or is it
also, no, exactly. I think also you would not use it. It's not the Avodah Zarah problem, because you're allowed to smell it. It's that it's, well, it's that
I think it's the Avodah Zarah. It's the Avodah Zarah problem.
Yeah, see, I thought it was the Avodah Zarah. Yeah, I thought it was that it's like there's something kind of like, even if we say it's not forbidden for you to like have derived benefit from smelling this, we find there's something kind of like repugnant about doing like a mitzvah with these things that were in Avodah Zarah wine. Like I was like rid of the mimais.
I'm just checking. You're right. That's what the Shach says at the very end of Kaf Vav. He says, "Asur mishum hikrivuhu na lepechatcha." In other words, it was it's like it was brought to an idolatrous place. Don't bring it into our place. Like Lexi was saying.
It can't really have anything to do with the smell, because I guess as we're about to read with the Taz, he says they don't get the smell from the wine. They're put in the wine because they get the smell to the wine.
Yeah, so no, I would just say it's
it's not like you're going to be smelling the wine. It's not a matter of smelling the wine. It's something about what that wine was used for.
Yeah, you're agreed. So yes, I accept the he'ara, the objection. Yes, it is clearly the Ramah, the Shach says at the end there that it's you brought it to the wrong. It's ugly because of its use, previous use, even though it's mutter. So we'll look at Yud. Josh.
מותר לארח בהם שאין היין נותן בהם כוח, אדרבה.
Or Reach, it should be Reach.
Sorry.
She'ein hayayin noten behem Reach. The wine is not there to put Reach into these things. Adarabba, go on.
אדרבה, הם מבשמים היין. וגם המריח אין כוונתו להריח היין, אלא לתבלין.
So he's saying it's like a sort of a side reason. Really, you can't have hana'ah from the wine, but you're not trying to have hana'ah from the wine. You're trying to have hana'ah from the spices. Mihu lahavdala.
It's strange.
Why is that strange? You're saying
just the kavanah comes into here.
Well, there's actually a famous Agadata in the Gemara, or anything that I know I think is famous, because I figure I don't know very much. But there's an Agada in the Gemara about, I forget who it was, but a certain rabbi comes to the bathing house and there's a statue of Aphrodite there. We learned this? And
It's in the Mishnah, I think.
it's a Mishnah. Maybe it's a Mishnah of Avodah Zarah. Yeah, Mishnah of Avodah Zarah.
It's Rabban Gamliel.
Thank you. See, I told you it's famous. It's very good. And they come and he says, how can you come to a bathhouse with a sapphire of Aphrodite in it? And he says, I don't come for her, she comes for me. In other words, I'm not there for her. She's just a decoration that they put up, but I'm not there for her. So you see that by Avodah Zarah, there might be a concept like that, that depends on your intention. Are you trying to benefit from it or not? Anyway, Ella Tavlin. You're not trying to smell the wine, you're trying to smell the tavli. Umihu.
ומיהו להבדלה אסור משום דאימאיס.
You see, that's where I got my thought from. When I read the ma'is, it sounds like it's like disgusting. But I don't know why it's disgusting. Maybe like the Shach says. Okay, continue.
משמע כאן דשאר פלפל מותר להבדלה, ולא כמו שמצאתי כתוב דאין לעשות במוצאי שבת הבדלה על פלפלים. Okay, so from this no, you can hear a yes, and in general, pepper does have enough smell for havdalah. ומביא ראיה מדאיתא במשנה סוף פרק רבי עקיבא, פלפלת כלשהו.
I don't know what that story is.
I don't know.
ואחר
כך, תנא, מיני בשמים כלשהו, שמע מינא דפלפלים אינן בכלל בשמים, אלא בכלל תבלין. Okay, so there's a chiluk made between pilel and besamim, and there are those people that learn from that you can't do havdalah on pilpel because it's not.
Right. In other words, the idea is like this: you can't use for havdalah spices. You have to use besamim. You can't use like cumin. Food spices. You can't use. You have to use smells, but not spices. There's a subtle difference. And the question is pilpel more like a smell or like a spice? Is it a tavlin? Like right?
Really? Can you use
Am I
cumin
misreading
for
that?
Havdalah?
Cumin? I don't. Shma mina the pilpelin eino bichlal besamim ela bichlal tavlin. Now there is a difference between besamim and tavlin.
No, tavlin gives a taste and besamim give a smell.
We're back to that question. What's the difference? I don't know.
Smells nothing,
No,
right.
but that's great. That's a great chiluk. That's like a raya to show that smell is different from taste. That's terrific. So far, that's great.
If you read the last line, look at just the last line of this Taz. Hare de pilpelin. It's the very end. He says Ad kan l'shono, and then he says at the end, like one line.
Hare de pilpelim einan bichlal tavlin ela dinam keshar besamim.
So here he says no. Whatever the proof was, not time for. He's saying no. Pilpelin einan bichlal tavlin. They're not tavlin. Ela dinam keshar besamim. They are smelly things. So, I don't know what exactly. I'm just saying there is a linguistic differentiation and there's a halachic differentiation, and they go together. If it's called besamim, it's mutter and havdalah, and if it's called tavlin, it's asur. What exactly are the list of things that are in each category? I can't tell you right now. But what was somebody said? A comment? Somebody want to read that comment?
I was just saying that it's in the 9th chapter of Shabbat when it's listing how much stuff you need to be chayav when you take outside when you're and it lists besamim separate from pilpellets, and so it seems that they're two different categories of things.
Okay, so that's interesting. A little side point. So let's continue on in Zion. Josh, you're doing a great job.
Oh no, I lost it. Okay. בשמים של עבודת כוכבים וכלאי הכרם ועורלה, אסור להריח בהם. Okay, other things you can't smell, fragrances of idol worshippers and mixtures of the vineyard and fruit from the first years of the tree. They're all forbidden also in Hana'ah, and I think, and you can't smell them.
Okay, look at, so, right, so, by the way, that's what I was kind of thinking about, that why we said before about the bread on the jar on the barrel of Vodazar wine, maybe even there, this, normally smell could be mutter, but these are things that are asur b'hana'ah. Orla is asur b'hana'ah. Vodazar is asur b'hana'ah. Klai kerem is asur b'hana'ah. So therefore, even the smelling of it is forbidden. Even though you could smell, there's what's not in this list is pork. If someone's frying bacon, you're allowed to smell it and say that smells wonderful, and can I come into the room and smell it more? You can seek out non-kosher smells, but not asur hana'ah smells. So maybe that's the reason that the wine-smelling bread is asur. Because it was a Vodazara wine.
If you walk past the Hindu temple.
Yeah, you can't smell. Yeah, it's a question. What if you have Hare Krishnas who are like burning incense? Can you intend to enjoy that smell?
But Rav Nachum, it looks like the Shach would say that for the things that are made for smelling, yes, but for like things that are made for eating,
Right.
but not for smelling, that's not the case.
So I want to get right to that. Yeah, we're talking about like they're burning incense. They're burning something for a smell. You're walking past a Hindu temple and you're smelling the smells. But yeah, if they're right. Well, that's an interesting thing. What about a korban? We bring a korban as a reach nichoach. Korban might be for the smell, but I don't know. They're making food for the priests in the Buddhist temple, and they're just making the food. Can you smell that? So that might be permitted. So let's look at Shach. This will be the last thing we'll look at. Look at Kaf Zayin.
Okay. זה אסור להריח בהן, ואסורים הן בהנאה, ככל שעשויים להריח כברד והדס וכולו, אסור. עד כאן לשון הרשב"א.
So things that are made for smell, like hadassim or roses, that's what's asur to hariach if it's avodah zarah stuff. We go on.
וכן כתב באורחות חיים, וזה לשונו, זה הכלל, כל מידי דלה הווה להריח, ריח עליו מלתהי. אבל דבר שעומד הריח, כגון ורד והדס, אסור ליהנות מהריח עד כאן לשונו, הקודש. So,
okay.
Also this chiluk of things which are made for smell, things which weren't made for smell, recha isn't milta, but things which are made for their smell, you're forbidden to use their smell.
Mm-hmm. I think the Shach goes on to discuss this in Palpel in this, but I just want to leave it there. So it does seem like there's an isser, that there's less of it, that there's more of an isser of when the things are asur b'hana'ah, obviously, then the smell. It's sort of a weird thing what he's saying here. It's like, is reich milta or reich not milta? And the answer is it depends. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. If the thing is asur b'hana'ah, then reich is milta. Then if it's not asur b'hana'ah, in other words, if it's made for smell, then it all of a sudden is reich milta. Again, we're not in a binary world. It's not just, maybe the whole discussion in the Gemara of reich milta was only talking where the thing wasn't made for the smell. Maybe that's what the Orchot Chaim is saying. Maybe the Orchot Chaim and then the Rashba are saying that whole discussion was where the things were foods. But where it's made for smell, then for sure Reicha is milta. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, Reicha is a thing. When that's the goal of what you when it's besama, you can't say that perfume is not a thing. Funny, that's a new expression in modern in the past 10 years. Is this a thing? Bill Maher says, why is this a thing? So
But it wasn't a new expression. It was already in the Gemara. Reicha lav milta
exactly.
right, yeah.
Exactly. It's not really a new expression. It's an old idea. Is this a thing? Is that a thing? So perfume is a thing. Okay. Ad kan Lashono. Any questions here? Wrote. Okay. Laila Tov.
Shkach,
Thank you
Very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.